always have that conversation on the podcast where we'll ask like a girl who's relatively young and popping or whatever, we'll ask her like, could you date a Foot Locker manager? Very rarely do you get a yes.
Right. I interviewed a professor, Dr. Tiosan Johnson, and he's California, University of California, Santa Barbara. He teaches Black masculine studies. And the net of it is he is on college campuses, right? And he'll have young college men and young college women in his class. And he asked the question to these women, 19 years old, and they're wanting men at a certain level. And these men in this room with their peers know they can't date them. They don't make enough money. And these women looking over at them like, come back to me when you have $100,000. That wasn't how it was when I was in college.
Right.
This is a recent phenomenon of the last 20 plus years as to where normal average ain't good enough. Everybody has to have a Mercedes, and you have to have a BMW, and we have to have a 5-bedroom house plus a vacation home, and we have to be able to travel to Europe. I'm like, wait a minute. We were happy if we went to Six Flags or Disneyland, but now you got to go to Paris?
Right.
Where did this come from, this insatiable, we were made consumers? And the women have that and why I say women is because when you start listening to the women who actually sold this, Cosmopolitan and all these kind of things are one of the easiest ways to keep money circulating in the community is keep men and women separate and keep marketing a lifestyle.
Wow.
You don't sell a piano to a middle-class person. That makes no sense. You sell a music room. Have anybody who's somebody has a music room. If you don't have a music room, well, you're pagan. So all of a sudden you'll justify buying a piano because I'm somebody.
Right.
Yeah. Then we'll start talking about pianos. I have a Steinway. I have this or that. You can't play a piano for a damn thing.
Right.
But you got this ancillary music room because somebody marketed it to you.
Yeah, and you end up with this sort of weird structure where you have all like a handful, the top 5 or 10% of men, and they're attracting a huge percentage of the attractive, eligible women, even though they have no interest in having a serious relationship with them. And then you have this other big chunk of men who now, like the media will call them incels or something along those lines, that are a little frustrated with the arrangement because they sort of see the world working this way, and they realize that even the women that they perceive as being on their approximate level of value are quite often not interested with any guy who is sort of near the lower end of the spectrum, right?
I spent the better part of a year and a half talking to guys called incels. They were labeled incels, but they don't want to be. They want women. They can't get them because women aren't paying any attention. And see, those guys got mischaracterized as neckbeard, Cheeto-eating dudes living in their mother's basement. I'm like, no. I know guys who are 40 years old making $160,000 as software engineers who are decent-looking guys, but they have no real social skills, so they're not being prioritized because it keeps getting pushed to the margins, the margins of men. And so I started off talking originally to men, my clients who are in image, and then I also started realizing I had an influx of these incel guys, and I thought that they were guys who were economically unattractive. That's the new word. No, these guys are solidly middle class or upper middle class. I'm like, so what the hell's going on? Does everyone have to have 6 figures and be a superhero? And that's really what you find out when you start asking women, what do you want? And my sales background and my way of probing and active listening and asking questions, I can finally get people to just tell me what you want, not what you'll accept. And what you're finding is from GED to PhD, women are wanting 2 to 3 kids. They don't want to have to work to pay significant bills, or they only want to have to work to pay 20% or less than the family bill. So you still want a provider male. That ain't the way this country's set up. Most people, you need 2 incomes, and then you're saying these guys aren't good enough. I'm talking to a woman in college and I asked her, could you date a plumber? And off the rip, she said no. I'm like, you know how much plumbers make?
Yeah, it's a great job.
But I'm like, but it was the fact that not only do you want a guy, now you're discriminating where his money comes from.
Right.
It's insane, and that's what this show is starting to highlight, starting to break apart a lot of this delusion. Because when you feed an appetite, it's no different than drugs. Let me give you a few hits for free, and then now you're gonna buy it. They've been sold on this idea that you don't want a high-value man, which is 6 different things. It's not just money. What you really want is this lifestyle. But then I asked, well, what are you bringing to the table, and what kind of relationship skills, and what he's going to get? That's where the crickets happen. So now it's really started a conversation that's much needed. We have gotten to the point to where, for the most part, we don't even know how to relate to one another. We know how to swipe left, swipe right, hook up, and get on.
Right. It's like the idea of two people who are at the relatively early stage in their career. When I think about my mom and dad, they met in college. They probably didn't have jobs or had bad jobs. And that was the dream. When I talked to my parents about what they wanted out of life when they were in their early 20s, they wanted to get married, get a house, have a couple of kids, work on their careers, and build a life together.
Yep.
And they did, and they've been together for 50 fucking years. And it's like, that's a beautiful thing, but it seems like that dream has kind of been lost along the way, where people got so overwhelmed with choice and so overwhelmed with climbing the social ladder and trying to have the best mate that they possibly can, that the idea of building something with their partner has sort of vanished to a lot of
It's
people.
social media, man. It's like now, every young girl that's coming up, they're looking at everybody's Instagram every day. They're seeing everybody with the nice purses. Like, I have a homeboy who gets depressed, like, when he watches other people's Instagram. I can post a picture and he's like, man, my day is messed up. How's your day messed up? Because somebody else, and you know, people spend their money and go their whole life trying to fit in with everybody else when they're not even in the same tax brackets and have the same social status and stuff.
See, and what I try to do is I'm like, I don't judge what people want. I just ask, are you really cut out for that? And do you really want that? Because, you know, you talk about this, social media has definitely, you know, thrown fuel on the fire, where you saying that used to be the American dream. Now, we're talking about women right now. Women want the outcome, but they don't want the work. And I'm saying, okay, well, at what point do men start making this six figures? You know that's at 45 to 55, right? So you're 22. You want a man in it? Oh, now you want him to be young and in the top 10%. And a certain, it's like, to the point to where they're starting to sit back and say, you know what? This is unrealistic and it's unsustainable, because most people aren't there. And even if you can get there from a look standpoint, there's only one. And what are you going to do to get it? So it's a much needed conversation, because, look, even the guys that are up there, they're just normal guys too. I'm like, you do realize their breath stinks in the morning. They have bad habits. You know, driven, motivated guys, you think they're going to be at home to go to the PTA meeting? They're working 12, 14, 16-hour days. You know, being a high-value man's wife is a lonely life. And you got to, not lonely, but you're not going to have everything. And that's, I think, what's happened. We've told everybody you can have everything. You can be whatever you want, and there's no limit. So now you have people thinking they can have it all when they're average. And then that leads to frustration and depression. When your expectation doesn't line up with reality, people get frustrated. Then you got guys who, you know, hearing these women saying, I couldn't date a guy making $50,000. Like, that's an insult. Like, you know, half of the men in this country make $50,000. That's the median income. So I'm like, so what are we ultimately saying to people? That the only way you're worth anything is if you're over here. Okay, well, are you planning on sharing these guys? I mean, what are you planning on doing?
Right.
And so now it's what it's starting to do is it's starting to make this conversation front and center, because before it was just a one-way conversation. And finally, men are what men want is being heard. Because if you were to say what's on your mind, or you would say what's on your mind, it's toxic. It's
Narcissist. I get called that here.
Narcissistic, misogynistic, or all these different things. And last night I did a broadcast about alpha females and beta males, and I was like, you know, when a woman says, I'm strong, independent, don't need a man, I need this, I'm like, she can be direct like she wants to, but if you do it, you're demanding, you're this. And I'm like, well, he who makes the goal rules. So, all right, you're accepted over here, accepted over here. And what we're really starting to see is the hypocrisies. And that's what happens in my show. I just question people, and I just let the public decide. What do you think? And now more people are saying, you know what? Maybe I do need to get some therapy. Maybe I need to really, because I push that heavily. You need therapy. And then I think we all can do therapy, whether you come from a troubled background or whether you're A-okay. It's maintenance. And then understanding that life is about people. Success is shared, and making money is a social activity. You want to get something out of somebody? How useful are you to somebody else? Because at the end of the day, you got your PhD and this and that, and you look to the right and you look to the left of you when the pandemic hit and we were on lockdown and you were there by yourself. That was the reality check. Now people are starting to realize, you know what? I may want somebody to walk through this life with me so somebody can chronicle my life. So when I finally do die, somebody can tell the people who are there what that hash mark in between born date and death date meant. If you don't have anybody next to you, it was almost like you weren't here.
Life is a lot less meaningful if you don't have somebody that you could partner with along the way. And I mean, some of us figure that out when we're 20, and some people figure it out it takes later into life. But I feel like your show is a consistent showcase of people that figure it out too late in life. What that they wanted to have that. And you know, it occurs to me, I remember when I was like 20, 21, I realized all the young girls I know, all the 18, 19, 20-year-old girls are really, really concerned with being with a guy who's got, you know, cool tattoos, cool clothes, cool jewelry, whatever. And then when I looked at the older end of the spectrum of the girls I knew at the time, or 28, 29, I started to notice them being more interested in guys who had careers that could take care of them, et cetera. It occurs to me when I see a lot of the women on your show, they end up trapped in that 20-year-old mentality for way too long, and then they might break out of it at 35 and realize, like, fuck, it would have been better if I had been building something along the way.
And that's one thing I tell women all the time is that I watch this shit damn near every day. I've yet to hear a woman call in and say, I just want love. You know what I mean? It's just like, and I've heard you say, like, there's nothing wrong with dating the plumber. You may be in love with the plumber, but because you don't want to walk or go anywhere with the plumber and stuff like that, you know what I mean? It's just the expectation. It pisses me off too.
It pisses me off.
Like, what's the problem with just wanting love? You can meet somebody that work at Petco. That could be the guy of your dreams, but he work at Petco. You don't want to bring him home to your mama. They're going to laugh at you and shit. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I have things on coming from my sales background. You want to close a deal, you don't give people 15 proposals. You give them 2. And you keep the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. You make it to where taglines. I'm a PhD. That has its own meaning now. The danger zone, 27 to 35. If you want a family and kids, you need to focus like a laser right here, because if you make it to 35, you cross into 36 to 60, no man's land. And more women have started to realize that, you know what? I never thought of it this way. I thought that I could just go out and live my Sex and the City life, and at 30-some-odd years old, I could just turn around and pick a man off the tree and run off. And no, you can't.
And they think they're going to have the same selection they had when they were 24 or whatever.
Right, dude. I did an Instagram, because I get a little bit more raw on Instagram.
All right.
Yeah.
And on Instagram, I was like, you better put a price on it. Better put a price on it. How much would it cost? Wait till I upload it. But I'm like, and one woman said she thought that she should have the same value on her lady parts at 35 that she did at 25. I'm like, are you what? It's got 10 more years of mileage on it. What are you talking about?
That's what you always said them with. Like, can you think of any product that just becomes more valuable with time?
With time.
But see, the thing is, I'm 51, so I'm in Generation X. We got a lot of bad information. So from 40 to 55, man, that worldwide in Western countries, it's a bad deal. In Japan and Korea, they got a thing where people are dying alone. What's it called? Kodokoshi?
Right.
Do you know how they know? They find you decomposing on your futon. Countries are not set up for single people into their elder years. I'm sorry. Men, we would end up, going off into the woods and dying alone. We at least have that dignity. Women are going to take their services. I mean, we call them hermits. We've called them weirdos, homeless, and we step right over them, in New York City. But not homeless women, there's nothing more vulnerable than a homeless woman. And so you don't have an infinite supply of money to fund people who've chosen, middling careers, because most people have jobs, not careers. And I just talk straight common sense that we all know, but we've gotten so far out of reality. It's like, all right, look, man, you probably had a suitable man at 22 years old. You were together 2 years. It always happens. You broke it off for some reason. You likely blew that. You blew it. All right, now you're 40. You just go make a deal. Go make a deal. I'll give you your insulin shot if you give my dentures, and we'll just figure this stuff out. Because you're not going to get love like you did at 20 in your early 20s. What you need is respect and companionship and somebody who's going to be there, and that other stuff can come once you know you have somebody there. And I witnessed my mother do this. She got married at 50, but I also witnessed my aunts. One died alone and the other's on the way. So this is personal for me too, especially when we talk about turning down the plumbers. I'm like, do you not realize we college guys that go to school in the suits, we just look like money. But these guys with the trucks and they own businesses, they actually can make money a hell of a lot sooner than we can with little or less debt, and they own it because they got a skilled trade of some sort. You know, if you're in corporate America, your ebb and flows go with the company, and you started to see more people started getting realistic after the 2008, the housing crisis. Because that's the first time it hit middle-class people.
Right.
You had people who had good middle-class jobs that just went away. When I was in Dallas, I saw people from 75 to 120, those jobs just left, and they didn't come back. And many of those guys went and started a landscaping company, became an HVAC technician, a plumber, roofer, something like that, and they're making money hands over fist, but they're not in a suit. They got a polo with their logo on right now, and those are the very men that a lot of women say it's
like-
because of their title. I can't take you to the bar with Chris.
It's fun.